What's good, everybody? I appreciate you checking in. All right, I'm going to give you my final opinion as the season comes to an end as to whether or not I think Antonio Pierce should remain as the head coach moving forward for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'm going to kind of hit this in a couple different ways, right? A lot of people are saying you got to roll with them. I know the record is bad, but look at Dan Campbell, right? And I'm going to touch on that. I'm also going to touch on whether or not there are other coaching prospects that will be available in the next coaching cycle that I would prefer over Antonio Pierce, and why I would prefer them, um, and why I think it's justifiable for Antonio Pierce to get another shot if we do stick with him. And so I'm going to give you my final kind of opinion on that again, now that the season has come to an end. And if Mark Davis does decide to move on from Antonio Pierce, I feel like it would be a fairly quick decision. I do think that it probably won't be more than maybe a few days after the final game on Sunday as to whether or not we move on from Antonio Pierce. And so I'm going to start with the comparison of Dan Campbell and Antonio Pierce. And I'm going to say it very bluntly. But before I get into that, let me know in the comment section down below, do you think Antonio Pierce should be the coach of the Las Vegas Raiders in the 2025 season? Let me know in the comment section down below. Also, before we get into it, hit that like button, subscribe, turn those notifications. My next giveaway is at 4,500 subscribers. If you want to be included, hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell so you do know when I drop more content. I definitely appreciate you. I appreciate all my viewers, my subscribers. I can't thank you guys enough. So let's take a look at this comparison. A lot of people will say, look at Antonio Pierce's first season, look at Dan Campbell's first season. And that's why they justify whether or not we should give Antonio Pierce another shot. And I'm going to sit there and just bluntly say we have to stop the comparison with Dan Campbell. It's apples to oranges. Antonio Pierce does not have the track record that Dan Campbell has. Dan Campbell has been coaching in the league for 14 years. He started his coaching career with the Miami Dolphins. He was the tight ends coach, but he also was the interim head coach as well. And then he moved on and he coached 5 years with the New Orleans Saints, 4 or 5 years with the New Orleans Saints. And he was the assistant head coach to Sean Payton, one of the better, more well-respected head coaches in the league, gaining very valuable experience. Again, being assistant head coach to Sean Payton, you're gaining knowledge and experience that you can carry on with you that can help develop you into a good either position coach, coordinator / head coach, right? And so he's gone through the ranks a little bit, right? And in addition to that, he was sought after. He was sought out after the Detroit Lions, right? They brought him in and they interviewed him. He went through the natural process of becoming a head coach. Now, he was never a coordinator, and I know a lot of people kind of put that expectation out there that in order to be a good coach, you need to be a coordinator. And I understand that. But he went through the natural process and gained the knowledge and experience to become a head coach. And again, he was sought after from the Detroit Lions, went through the interview process. Now let's look at Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce, after a year and a half of coaching in the NFL, he got the interim job. And the interim job, I think he got because, one, obviously we got rid of Josh McDaniels, and Josh McDaniels was also our offensive coordinator. So we let him go. We need to bring an offensive coordinator. I don't think that they elevated Patrick Graham because it really didn't make much sense, right? Our defense was what was kind of holding us together. Our defense was improving, and you didn't want to mess that up. And so it didn't really make much sense to elevate Patrick Graham. You wanted to keep at least one side of the ball intact. And so I understood not giving Patrick Graham the interim head coaching job. And so the next best guy, which, look, he's a great motivator. He is a good leader of men, Antonio Pierce. And so I think that was the natural progression, is to elevate Antonio Pierce, especially with just his knowledge as a player, right? And so I understood it. And then so at the end of the season, I think the players as well as the fan base motivated and influenced Mark Davis to keep Antonio Pierce. Now, the entire fan base was divided. Some wanted Jim Harbaugh, others wanted Antonio Pierce. But I understood. I understood why you went with Antonio Pierce. Again, the locker room wanted him. The players played for him. You could tell that last game against the Denver Broncos, they were playing for Antonio Pierce because that was Antonio Pierce's opportunity to get above that 500 mark between his wins and losses with a win against the Denver Broncos, and they came out and they played. So I give him that. And so I understand why we went with Antonio Pierce. And so again, I'm just showing the comparison. Antonio Pierce was given the job because the players in the locker room wanted him, and the Raider fan base, they were chanting for him, and they were basically telling Mark Davis, this is who we want. And so he pulled that trigger and he did it. And I also think that there's probably a little bit of regret maybe that Mark Davis didn't give Rich Bisaccia an opportunity, because we all know how the Josh McDaniels situation turned out. So I think maybe in the back of his mind, this is just pure speculation, but in the back of his mind, Mark Davis probably regretted not giving Rich Bisaccia an opportunity. And so maybe he had to roll with Antonio Pierce. And so that's kind of where we find us. And so again, if you only want to hold on to Antonio Pierce because of the Dan Campbell comparison, throw it out the window. Throw it out the window, because Dan Campbell is no comparison, or I guess I would say Antonio Pierce is no comparison to Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell did it the right way. Antonio Pierce is an emotional hire. That's basically what he is. And he was kind of given the opportunity by default. That's my opinion. So again, let's stop that comparison. Do not think Antonio Pierce is the right person for the job because of Dan Campbell. Let's stop all that. Now, next I'm going to touch on, I think Antonio Pierce is just kind of given a shitty hand. All right. And I say that, for all the coaches on this coaching staff, you look at the amount of injuries that we've went through. There's not a single coach that would be able to find success with the amount of injuries that we have incurred through this entire season. There's not a single coach that would find it. And we didn't have a really good roster to start. Let's put it that way. Our roster wasn't amazing. Maybe on the defensive side. The defensive side had the personnel, had the talent, right? But Malcolm Kuntz goes down. And then your number one free agency acquisition, Christian Wilkins, he goes down. And then Jacorian Bennett goes down. Marcus Epps goes down. Then let's look at the offensive side, right? You start out with all the injuries on the offensive line, okay? Colton Miller's coming off the shoulder surgery. JPJ wasn't playing. Michael Merrill all of a sudden has his issues, and he had to step away from the team, which was unexpected. And I think Michael Merrill was going to play a huge role in the run blocking game as a tight end. And guess what? That's what he's shown so far. So you didn't have him for basically the first half of the season. And then you had the whole Devonta Adams situation. Now you can put that on the shoulders of whoever you want. That could be on the shoulders of Antonio Pierce, or it's on Tom Telesco, whatever it may be. But you had the Devonta Adams situation. That good luck. And once Devonta Adams walked and went on to the Jets, then Jacoby Myers had to sit 2 games because of an injury. And so we're playing with nothing but practice squad receivers, number 2 and number 3 receivers. You had Trey Tucker and DJ Turner out there, both receivers under 5'11", playing as your number 1, number 2. And then you had nothing but practice squad tight ends. You had Justin Shorter that came in, practice squad tight end. You had to basically work with. I mean, there were so many injuries, not to mention we played against Cincinnati and 3 offensive linemen go down in the same exact game. So I'm going to give Antonio Pierce a little bit of leeway because of just all the injuries that we incurred throughout the entire season. All right. And then let's take a look at who Antonio Pierce, as much as you could. A lot of people blame the offensive struggles and issues on Luke Getsy, okay? And so we let him go. But you got to remember, Antonio Pierce wanted Cliff Kingsbury, and he was essentially hired, but then he walked away from the contract. And it remains to be seen. A lot of people say that we weren't going to give Cliff Kingsbury 3 years when that's what he wanted. And so, Antonio Pierce, we all know that he wanted Jane Daniels, but that just wasn't going to happen. I think the Washington Commanders were never going to come off of that. And I don't think Tom Telesco was going to move up that far to go get him. But we all know that that's who Antonio Pierce wanted. And then he was going to try to match him up with Cliff Kingsbury, and that just didn't work out. So you got to give Antonio Pierce credit for just wanting to get Cliff Kingsbury in the building as his offensive coordinator. So that shows me that he can potentially bring in somebody of good caliber to possibly be the offensive coordinator or a position coach and build a decent coaching staff. Okay. So I will definitely give him that. And then once Cliff Kingsbury walked, then you're kind of left with the pick of the litter. There's not much left to pick from once Cliff Kingsbury walked away. All right. Because a lot of offensive coordinators already went and signed with their teams. And so that was a tough situation. So I think that Antonio Pierce was left with bottom of the barrel to kind of bring in as his offensive coordinator. So you got to give Antonio Pierce credit. In addition to that, I do have some issues with Antonio Pierce and just his ability to game manage. And I understand that there's some growing pains with him being a new head coach. He's only been in the league for 2.5 years coaching. And so there are some growing pains with that. But unfortunately, some of the game decisions, the clock management, very, very skeptical. Those are definitely some of the things that I have major concerns about. All right, moving forward. So with that being said, what I will say is, if Antonio Pierce, the hot commodity moving forward in the 2025 head coaching cycle, is going to be Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is going to be the hot commodity. And Here's my thing. I don't think Ben Johnson's come over here, because if you wanted Ben Johnson to come over here, you better been sitting at the number 1 or number 2 draft position to be able to get the quarterback that he wants to bring in. As an offensive mind, he's going to want to prep and build and grow his own quarterback. All right. And so I don't think Ben Johnson's going to want to come over. You can want him all you want. I don't think that this is going to be an ideal spot for him, because I don't think we're going to be in position to get the quarterback, especially if we beat the Chargers. If we beat the Chargers and all of a sudden now we're sitting at number 10, good luck. Ben Johnson, it's not going to be a desirable spot for Ben Johnson to come over here, whether or not you want him or not. But here's my thing. Is if Ben Johnson does want to come over here, I would be okay with moving off of Antonio Pierce. And here's my reason why. You look at all the successful teams moving forward, right? You got Andy Reid over there, offensive-minded head coach. You got Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers, offensive-minded head coach. You see what Sean McVay is doing now with that Rams offense, now that they're completely healthy, right? And the thing is with all these teams that continue to find success, they're offensive-minded head coaches that can get their quarterback and grow their quarterback, build their quarterback, and now they find consistency year over year. One of my biggest questions with Dan Campbell is the only reason why Ben Johnson stayed this final year is because they want to have that legacy. They want to go after a Super Bowl and bring the first Super Bowl to the Detroit Lions, to that city of Detroit. And I respect that without question. But what's going to happen when Ben Johnson moves on? Will Dan Campbell be able to find that next up-and-coming offensive coordinator, that offensive coordinator that's going to help build a brand new offense and get that rapport with Jared Goff, right? Is he going to be able to find that year over year? Because let's say the Detroit Lions do win a Super Bowl, right? And Ben Johnson moves on. Right. If that offensive coordinator comes in and finds success 2 years later, guess what? That offensive coordinator is probably going to find himself a head coaching position. And now Dan Campbell's going to find himself in that coaching cycle again, trying to find another offensive coordinator. And you're going to continue to try to find that. There's very few head coaches that can do that. Mike Tomlin maybe is one of them that can find himself quality coordinators. You got John Harbaugh over there with the Ravens, can continue to find himself good coordinators. Very few can do it. And so that's the only reason, in my opinion, that I would be okay with moving on from Antonio Pierce at this point, is if you find yourself that offensive-minded head coach that can now build a quarterback and potentially find continued success with an offense. That's what I would like to see, and I would be okay with moving on from Antonio Pierce. That's why, as much as I didn't think the Josh McDaniels hire was a good one, I wasn't a fan of Josh McDaniels, but I understood the concept. I understood that this is what good teams are doing. They're finding their offensive coordinators and making them head coaches. One of the coaches, Matt LaFleur, that's a great example. He's being able to take Jordan Love and build him, grow him. This offense continues to find success as the years go on. And so they've found themselves their offensive-minded head coach, and that's what they're doing. And so, again, but I understood the direction that Mark Davis was trying to go with Josh McDaniels. And so, again, that's the only reason why I would potentially move off of Antonio Pierce at this point, is if we were able to find an offensive-minded head coach that can find his quarterback and can grow this offense and find continued success on that side. Because you lock in a solid offensive mind, and you don't have to continue to look at the coaching cycle year over year. When you do have a good offense, all of a sudden you got to move on. That's one of the worst things you can do to a quarterback, is continue to change the offensive scheme. If you continue to change the offensive scheme and you continue to potentially change personnel, right? Not every single person on the offensive side of the ball is going to match the scheme that you continue to bring in. And so you might see different players come in and out. And you don't want that inconsistency for your offense, for your quarterback. And so, again, if the opportunity comes available that we can bring in that offensive mind, I'd be okay with it. Because if you can match up that offensive mind with his quarterback, I think that would be one way that this Raiders fan base can now find some patience, right? What happens if Antonio Pierce drafts a quarterback next season, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in the same exact position that we sit today, right? Everybody's going to say, look, I told you so, AP should have been gone. They're not going to allow the process to continue. But I do think that's one thing that this Raider fan base could possibly get behind and allow for some patience, is if you bring in an offensive-minded head coach and match them up with their quarterback, and now we can start to develop an offense. And again, you do that. That's a 3-year process. That's a 3-year process of finding consistent progress. So that's my opinion, guys. And I know it's tough. At the end of the day, we don't know what Mark Davis is going to do, and we don't know what Tom Brady's influence on Mark Davis is going to be moving forward. So that's kind of my take. Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you want Antonio Pierce to be the head coach for Las Vegas Raiders moving forward? And if not, then let me know who you want us to target. Are you a Ben Johnson guy? Do you want to see Ben Johnson have a chance if he is open to becoming the Las Vegas Raiders head coach? Do you want to see us basically go after him and bring him in and shoot our shot at Ben Johnson? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you're not a Ben Johnson guy, who else would you like to see? A lot of people are throwing out Mike Vrabel's name. Let me know in the comment section down below. If you don't want AP, who would you prefer as the Las Vegas Raiders head coach? So again, I appreciate you guys. Make sure you like this video, subscribe, turn those notifications. My next giveaway is at 4,500 subscribers. So if you want to be included, hit that subscribe button. Also turn on that notification bell so you do know when I drop more content. So again, appreciate you. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one. I'm out.